The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Yeah, Schmidt, I'm not sure if we're supposed to be hearing you here. Wait. How's that? No, I'm still not hearing you. We're off to a flying start here on a Saturday morning. I can see Chris Schmidt in front of me. He's got the headphones on. He's at his house. He's speaking into the mic, and I have no idea what he's saying.
Maybe it's a mute
There.
Okay.
We're back. We're back. That was a rough first 60 seconds of this show, but we made it through.
Kind of looked like USC's second half, you know? I mean, that's just how it shook out, but we're excited to be with you this morning on Hail Varsity Weekend Edition presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. Mark Cranack on assignment, and I think he's on assignment to either the pharmacy or the doctor's office. I feel awful for Cranack. He is under the weather, man. And you and I both know that there's enough garbage going around that people are dealing with, just the crud, right? So we're telling Mark to get better, to get some chicken noodle soup and come back at it next week. What we've got in store for you is a week's worth of just whirlwind news, movement, and ups and downs, really, if you're a Nebraska fan, from Monday, or really a week ago, when we were on the air here with Matt Rule making his announcement, Nebraska making their announcement as he's the 31st head coach, to his presser on Monday, the just absolute tragedy that has been the Mickey Joseph story that came down Wednesday, to Nebraska, Matt Rule and his staff hitting the road and recruiting and doing a bang-up job, at least in state. They made their way about everywhere in the metro the last 24 hours or so, between Omaha and also Lincoln. It's funny, I saw on Twitter with Matt Rule heading over to the Gatula household and posing with Gunner, of course, 2023 commit for Nebraska, offensive lineman out of Lincoln Southeast. And someone on Twitter's like, it's always awesome when you recruit linemen that are bigger than the Christmas tree. Just picture a Rule with Gatula, and you can't see the tree. So it's been interesting, and you have to anticipate too that Nebraska will stay on the road and get out to some of the other communities today around the state, and wisely, Coach Rule's got a kind of a camp deal going on tomorrow. So he'll have the top prospects and kids in state get in front of him tomorrow with kind of a Friday Night Lights Sunday edition camp. So he's not joking around with his dedication in state. He's not joking around with the phone calls he's made this week to so many high school coaches. It's not lip service, Elijah. He's all about that. And that's more of a, as you hear people say about that life, he really absolutely is, with development and trying to build up Nebraska football on the lines of scrimmage.
And think about that week, the bit that's been for Matt Rule in terms of just whirlwind. And we sit here in the media and say, wow, it's been a whirlwind week for us. But sit back and look at Matt Rule, where you walk in and now you have to deal with the fallout of the Mickey Joseph arrest, walking into the job, all while trying to juggle finding assistant coaches and recruiting them from across the country, bringing them in to be a part of your new staff. You still got spots to fill, so you're trying to handle that, all while you're trying to re-recruit the kids that are already in the program, these kids that you want to be part of the program next year and don't want to enter the portal. You're trying to re-recruit them and juggle that situation all while doing the assistant coaches. And now recruiting's open too, so now you got to be driving all around the state, calling high school coaches, meeting with high school coaches, meeting high schoolers, recruiting, getting out across the country and recruiting, trying to build a recruiting class in the 2 weeks that you have to try and do so. We can complain, Schmitty, about whirlwind, because I don't think we're going to. These are the kind of weeks we live for. They're exhausting. You get to Saturday and you go, okay, I'm ready to get home from the Saturday morning show and get in a Saturday afternoon nap after the U.S. men's national team game, obviously. Like, I sit there and go that, but makes me question whether I could make it as a college football coach. What a crazy week. And he's all the while posting photos at 5 a.m. saying, like, oh, yeah, we're at the stadium. Here's the national championships. We're working. Like, it's just a crazy, crazy life. And this is the craziest weeks of being a college football coach. Whenever you first get that new job and you got to grind because you got 2.5 weeks to set up your entire future, at least the future of the first year of your football program.
Well, and honestly, what kind of foot are you going to get off on, right? Are you on the right foot or the wrong foot? And the right foot is to follow through with those words, and you're a dynamic speaker. You're going to command the room, but really he got off on the right foot. And I know there's been a slew of kids that have hit the portal, and that's no good for Nebraska, but it's a reality. It's an absolute reality in the world of college football. And it's not just Nebraska. I mean, Iowa's lost 5 kids. Nebraska, Ernest Hausman's kind of the headliner this week. But the first thing Matt Rule has done this week, Monday turned into Tuesday as the week's gone on, is meet with everybody on the team. And he's met with everybody on the team in smaller groups, but he wants feedback. What do you love about the program? What haven't you liked about the program? How do we make it better for you? He's a communicator. He's a guy that can get on the pulpit and command a room. But I think his biggest gift is the ability to listen, process, and then put that plan into action with what he thinks is going to be best, but also getting that feedback from his kids. And that's already taken place. So, from a staff standpoint, Nebraska still needs 2 more spots filled on the defensive side. Nebraska still needs a couple of spots filled on the offensive side. Offensive line coach, defensive coordinator specifically are still looming a bit. We'll see if either get filled next week because coaches are playing in the conference championship games this weekend. If you were going to hire somebody that's not performing this weekend or part of a team, you probably would have done that already, I would think.
And this might be a good time to bring up the fact that something we talked about earlier this week is I think trending in that direction that Raiola could be returning as the offensive line coach for the Huskers next season. And I know fans may roll their eyes at that, but what I'm hearing, and let's throw this out there real quick, it's not like I got any sources close to Matt Rule right now that are feeding me information about the assistant coaches, but word on the street is it could be Raiola is one of the only assistant coaches or the only assistant coach held over from the previous staff because he hasn't yet cleaned out his office. So unsure what that means. Sounds like he could still have his office down at the stadium, though. So something to follow there. It sounds like we could be trending, though, towards Donovan Raiola being the one assistant coach that gets held over from the previous staff. And as we talked about earlier this week, it's because he fits that mold of what Matt Rule is looking for with assistant coaches. And I could be wrong. Not going to burn the tape. I'll stand by this because, I mean, maybe someday, Schmitty, we'll have some sources close to Matt Rule that can let us know what's going on. I don't know. But from what it sounds like right now, he could be held over because he does fit that mold of young and hungry and ready to prove himself. And whenever you look around the entire Matt Rule staff, I mean, Terrence Knighton's a guy that former NFL guy, former assistant coach, not within like the whole position group to himself. He didn't have the entire D-line, but he was an assistant D-line coach, similar to how Donovan was an assistant offensive line coach in the NFL. They're bringing him back down to college. It just seems like he does fit that mold of what Matt Rule is looking for. And with Donovan Raiola, the question is, I think, was the offensive line improving last season, which I believe it was, and what was the talent like before he got there? What did he have to work with? Those are the things you have to ask yourself, and I'm sure those are the things Matt Rule is doing the legwork on right now, trying to determine with Donovan Raiola, because you don't want to hold over a lemon. You don't want to hold over a lemon. You don't want to let the previous coaching staff, quote-unquote, sell you a lemon, I guess. You don't want to be stuck with the guy that is not the young and hungry coach that you think he is, but I think that's the direction we're trending in right now, and I'll be honest with you, from an amateur offensive lineman's eyes, I do think that offensive line got better as the season went on last year. It was rough at a lot of times. The running game, you needed a lot of work as the year went on, and it never quite got its feet underneath it. But the pass protection from the offensive line did get better as the season went on, and look at the juggernaut pass rushes that they were facing as the year went on with Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. All three of those teams have a really, really good pass rush, and through those 3 games, I think Nebraska did pretty well. The second half against Michigan was probably the worst performance of those 3 games, but against Wisconsin, against Iowa, that offensive line performed admirably in pass protection based on what we had seen. It was not a perfect game from that offensive line, but I do think we saw some strides, and I'm sure that's something Matt Rule is evaluating this week as he's trying to finish out his assistant coaching staff.
To your point on the offensive line, they, as the season went on, their problem wasn't, all right, are you giving the quarterback enough time? Against Minnesota, pre-injury for Chuba, I mean, he got chased a lot. Okay, your offensive problem was triple-fold, right? I mean, it was quarterback play beyond Casey. You had an anemic offense beyond Casey. You have a running game that wasn't emphasized, and I just don't know that dynamic was ever going to work between Whipple and Raiola, because Whip wants to throw the football 100 times, and you tell me this, the offensive line group that Nebraska has, if they got down and dirty about it and wanted to set the tone and start off as a run team like they did against Illinois, that opening drive. Check it. The week after Illinois was who? Minnesota? Is that right? Mm-hmm. The opening, wow, where was that? Everyone's like, oh God, what's going to happen with the offense? But that opening drive with Purdy, where they go up 7-0, it's good of a drive as you've seen as a Nebraska fan, where they went double tight. They didn't stay in double tight very long, right? It was real easy to abandon the run game. It was real easy to throw your clipboard or chuck your headset if you're Whipple, because Grant seeing ghost and not pressing the hole and taking on contact. He's always trying to bounce outside. Eventually, they went to Ramir in the second half of the Iowa game just because Grant was dancing so much. And listen, I think Grant's a tremendous back, and he was just frustrated. Nebraska could never run the football when they had to, right? And when it comes to 3rd and 8, and the running game isn't working, is there an offensive line that's going to be able to withstand the obvious? All right, everyone's pinning their ears back. Here comes the blitz package. Let's get home with 4. You know what's coming. Nebraska's going to throw the football with a second or third team quarterback until Casey got back. So I think a lot of offensive lines would look bad. I was hearing yesterday that Nebraska was moving on from Raiola. Okay. So I just don't know. I just don't know. But when it comes to the NFL and guys like Pot Roaster, guys around the league, Rule is going to be able to find out real easy with what others have said about Raiola, his potential, his ability, just because he was with the Bears as long as he was. And I know that there's been, an extensive meeting. There had been an extensive meeting with Raiola and Rule this week. So he wasn't ready to just punt the guy because you're not one of us. There was some time and evaluation put in.
And let's make one thing clear. I'm not trying to sit here on a Saturday morning and tell you that, well, everyone says the offensive line was bad last year, and they were. I think they were pretty good. No, it's not that. I still think the offensive line was pretty bad last season.
Kind of giving you the elements of why. On top of their own performance, there's other things that that really piled on an already difficult situation.
From injuries, suspensions of Newelly, the fact that, you get better at doing things on a football field, and what Nebraska did a lot was throw the ball last season, and where I saw improvement with the offensive line was throwing the football. And if you committed to running the football, would there be more on tape that could be teaching moments for Coach Raiola in order to develop the run game more? Maybe. I don't know if we'll ever know that because that wasn't a part of Whipple ball, but all I'm saying is I don't think it would be the worst decision in the world if he were to keep on Raiola, and I don't think that it would either be just because he couldn't find anyone else. I don't think it's because Raiola is close to his nephew and they're trying to do a recruiting job on Dylan Raiola. I don't think it's any of that. I do think there is some respect and admiration for Coach Raiola, and I don't think it's unfounded. I just think Coach Raiola was put in a very tough spot last season with what he had on the offensive line, with what they were trying to do, changing offensive linemen's bodies through the offseason last year. I think he was put behind the eight ball with the offensive line last season. I do think, as I said before, that there was some improvement, and the question moving forward has got to be, well, is this a guy that, is trying to get his feet wet in college football and got thrown into a really, really tough situation in his first season, and we think there's still room for improvement? Or are we thinking that, a really good offensive line coach could have done more? I don't know if we'll ever know, but that's some of the things that have to be going through Coach Rule's head right now of, what did you see from Coach Raiola in his first year? Because you expect improvement in a position group throughout a year. And I think we saw that with the offensive line. The question was there enough improvement for you to say, I think Coach Raiola did all he could with that offensive line?
That's Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. It's the weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Coming up this hour in the Rewind, we had a chance to sit down and spend some time with NFL Hall of Famer and an early influence on Coach Rule. Dick Vermeil joined us. So we'll hear some of that this hour. Also get some thoughts you'll hear the interview from Thursday. That was Jim Rome and Matt Rule. So Matt Rule's made some of the national sit-downs, be it Rich Eisen or Jim Rome, the NFL Network 2 weeks ago, stating that I got to get back into coaching. And then, of course, game day 1 week ago. So Nebraska's getting a national platform and spotlight with their coach who's, very, very comfortable in the interview settings. The other news this week was Mickey Joseph, as he was arrested on Wednesday as he spent the night in jail for domestic dispute. There has been just god-awful rumors floating around in the wake of what happened versus what your neighbor's friend's cousin's best friend's dog told you. I mean, it's terrible, and you've got a guy in Mickey Joseph that was so good at leading men this year in tough circumstances. You have some horrible accusations, and the incident report is disgusting. There is, innocent till proven guilty in this country, which we all believe. But right now he is on leave with the university per Trev Alberts. And you go from the moment where, okay, here's Matt Rule. You would like to think there's an offer to stay in Lincoln from Matt Rule to Mickey Joseph. I believe that was possibly very, very likely. I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I think if Mickey would not have gotten a head job, say at Tulsa or somewhere else, I think absolutely Mickey Joseph's on staff here under Matt Rule. Now moving forward, the future's up in the air because of these charges. And moving forward that way, the domino here from a football standpoint is all the kids Mickey connected with in the recruiting world for 2023. And you have to go back and try and mend some of those fences. And in the grand scheme, as big of a football fan as you are, the commitment or decommitment of a kid that it really connected with Mickey Joseph isn't important in comparison to Mickey and what he's going through right now and the situation he put himself in if these charges are true.
Yeah, and
there's context is what I'm trying to tell you.
And I think the place you keep coming back to as a Husker fan this week is from all the work that Mickey Joseph did on the field this year. You hope these accusations aren't true because of how well respected he became throughout the course of the season. It just flies in the face of that, and you hope it isn't the end of his coaching career, but also you sit back and go, you know what? I hope justice is served in this situation. If the accusations are true, you don't think he can ever get back on a college football field again. So it's this weird, trying to reconcile what you thought you knew about Mickey Joseph with what you've heard and what you've learned this week about what was actually going on behind the scenes allegedly. And it's been such a tough situation. But getting back to football here, as you said, the recruiting aspect of things here is just it's while I agree with you, it pales in comparison. It's put Matt Rule in a very tough spot, and I think that was the main appeal with Mickey Joseph and bringing him back was, look how great a recruiter is. Look what he's done on the recruiting trail. Now you got kids that have been blindsided by this news. I mean, these are kids that have become very close with Mickey Joseph as well throughout the past couple of months, and I'm sure they're just as blindsided now. Like, do they even want to think about being recruited right now after someone that they trusted and someone that they committed the next 4 years of their life to has gone and blindsided them with this news and this arrest? And it's a tough spot for them, and it's a tough spot for the coaching staff too, now having to go back and reevaluate your talent and go look at these guys. And whirlwind week as we let off the show, Schmidt. It's just there's so many different moving parts with Husker football right now, and it's such a volatile and important time for just the long-term success of the program. And I mean, we before the hire talked about how important these 2 weeks would be in terms of recruiting, in terms of re-recruiting your roster for transfer portal purposes, and then going and hitting the portal, trying to fill in some holes. Like, you're making or breaking your next season with the next 2 weeks, with what is done, both keeping players around it and adding in new talent. I mean, and we saw last season there's going to be some attrition and some additions post-spring ball as well, but this is such a vital time for Matt Rule and what he's trying to build, that this news about Mickey Joseph and how it's shaken up the recruiting for Nebraska is just such a tough spot for, I guess, not only Matt Rule, but the staff and the team as well. As it's complicated. So many things that you thought you knew that are now changing, and it's not the conversations I was expecting to have whenever we started this week, because we started off Monday with excitement, with hope, with it's a new era for Husker football, and then it almost felt like it all came crashing down on Wednesday with just how shocking that news was. And it kind of feels the same way for the recruiting class as well, just because, I mean, I want to make it clear that you and I, Schmitty, both understand that some things in life are more important than football, and the arrest of Mickey Joseph is one of those things that, off the field right there is so much more important than what Mickey Joseph brings on the field, because you expected somebody who was stand up in the community from what you saw on the football field, and you found out that wasn't true. But it's a vital time for Matt Rule and his coaching staff right now, and I've said that a couple times, but it's how do I want to put this? I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought, Schmidt. It's 7:30 in the morning. You know how it goes.
No, you're good. It's important to have perspective.
Yes.
Right. And Nebraska's perspective is limit damage within the locker room, portal-wise. Ernest Hausman gone. Jaden Daniels gone. Not Daniels. Gould, thank you. Gone. You have another handful of guys on their way out. And then in-state, who do you flip or retain or get back in the boat? With Malachi Coleman, you have Zane Flores, Maverick Noonan, Benny Nagoy, Gunnar Gatula, Benjamin Brahmer. I mean, those are all priorities. You know that Flores is solid with Oklahoma State. Cade McIntyre's going elsewhere, but maybe you can flip Nagoy from Iowa State. You've got Maverick Noonan. He was a 7 a.m., 7:30 visit yesterday by Nebraska staff. Malachi got it in home. And you have Ben Brahmer that is a stud from Pierce. And then you have other prospects. The Hyannis kid that we've talked to Brady Holtman's about. I mean, Notre Dame's going to be in his house today. Clemson. You've got Penn State, I should say, not Clemson, but Penn State, Notre Dame are going heavy after the Hyannis prospect. So we'll take a quick time out. We'll rewind it with Dick Vermeil, as he has had quite a bit of input with Matt Rule in his career, early in his coaching career, and one of those mentors and relationships you want to hear about. It's really a cool backstory with Vermeil and, of course, his ties, too, with all the years he covered Nebraska working with Musburger and then coaching Grant Wistrom and winning a Super Bowl with the Rams. So a lot of Nebraska flavor with Dick Vermeil, NFL Hall of Famer. Next weekend edition of Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
Now it's time to get back to the Hail Varsity Radio Show with Chris Schmidt and Mark Cranack.
All right, that's it. You two guys leave me no choice. No television for a week. What?
Back into it, it's hour two. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Let's find out more about Nebraska's new head football coach, Matt Rule. And pleased to be joined by Hall of Fame coach, the NFL, Dick Vermeil, a Super Bowl champ with the Rams, a Super Bowl appearance with Philly, and a great run in Kansas City. Coach Vermeil, a pleasure to speak with you again. How's your day?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about Matt Rule. I'm a big fan of his.
Well, Coach, let's start with when you first met Coach Rule and your guys' coaching relationship. When did that start?
I met him when he was the head coach at Temple, and I used to go to 1 or 2 practices a year because a very personal friend of mine was on the board at Temple University, and we would go watch him practice. And I was always impressed with the job that he was doing coaching. And then when he goes on to Baylor and did what he did there, it impressed me even more.
Coach, I think I read somewhere, maybe with The Athletic, that early in his time at Temple, you had reached out to Coach Rule and given him some advice after a tough start to his tenure there.
Well, I probably did. You know, I live here in the Philadelphia area, and I respect the school. I have friends on the board there, and I'd like them to be successful. It would be great for the school. And when Matt got them going, it proved how successful and what kind of a contribution a good football program could make to the school. You know, they beat Penn State, they almost beat Notre Dame, and the school was on fire. So Matt did a beautiful job.
Really fast, Coach, can you speak on just how difficult it is to go win at a place like Temple? You've heard that a lot from people around the country, that what was really impressive about Matt Rule is not how quickly he built Temple, but the fact that it was Temple. Can you speak on that for a second, just what kind of job it is to go rebuild a school like Temple?
Well, first off, it's a great university academically.
Mm-hmm.
The problems are they don't have the same facilities of most of the schools they compete against, and that negatively influences young kids making a decision where they're going to go to school. So they have to do an extra fine job of recruiting, selling the football program and the academics, and not so much the facilities, and back it with performance on the practice field, providing great structure and discipline and tempo. And Matt Rule did all of that when he was here at Temple because I watched him do it.
Tell me a little bit about Coach Rule's coaching style. Dick Vermeil is with us. What stands out? You've seen a lot of coaches. You've competed and coached against some of the greats. And how does his style and his methodology and philosophy, how has he been able to turn that into winning? I mean, his personality. Tell me what makes him such a high-level guy, aside from the wins that's been proven in his past stops.
Well, I thought he always had great structure, a deep philosophy of how to coach, communicate, teach, how to hire, how to lead. And I think there was always a little air of toughness about him. I think, you know, in office, obviously, I think he inherited a few great qualities from Bill Parcells the time he spent with him. And those kinds of things. I was just impressed with his overall leadership, combined with all the other aspects it takes to be a head football coach, and especially at Temple. And then when he went on to Baylor and did what he did there, I said, you know, I'm right about this guy. He can coach.
You look at some of those traits, and toughness is something he preached at Temple. He preached it at Baylor, and he preached it at the opening press conference. And tell me about his fit with Nebraska. You know the Nebraska program pretty well from covering it with ABC, with ABC and CBS.
Well, Nebraska's a great school, a great athletic program with great facilities and great leadership on campus. And I really felt your last head coach that they just fired was going to be extremely successful there. I really did, because I really enjoyed watching his Florida team play. And the one year they were the only undefeated team in college football or big-time football. And, and it didn't work out. And sometimes things just don't go as well as you'd like them to go. And sometimes it's not coach's fault. And Nebraska's changed over the years. I can remember going there and watch practices. They had so many kids on the field, all the walk-on kids, and a lot of them ended up being good football players. Now there's limitations to those kinds of things. And there's also more football programs today with unbelievable facilities and emphasis on winning than in the old days. There are so many schools that make it tougher for you to be as good as you used to be because the environment's changed. And I think it's a tougher job today than it used to be. And, of course, we all know why it was so successful with the coach there. And then, gosh darn it, I think Matt will have a challenge. But as I said, I think he'll get it done. And, of course, I thought the young coach that they left there, I remember broadcasting a game when he was playing quarterback in Nebraska. So, it's not as, let's say, easy as it used to be. That's all. It's a little tougher. And the evaluation process is a lot tougher.
Well, Coach, you mentioned Scott Frost, and one of the things that people kept on coming back to, at least around the state, was the fact that it never quite seemed like his scheme matched up with what the rest of the Big Ten wanted to do and how you really win in the Big Ten. So I want to get your take on Matt Rule and his scheme and just how that adjusts to the Big Ten. Do you think there's something to that, the fact that you have to play football a little bit differently in the Big Ten Conference?
Well, never having coached in the Big Ten, having coached college ball against the Big Ten, there was always a little difference between Big Ten football than, say, the West Coast football where I was. The passing game was a bit more of an emphasis in college football on the West Coast than it was in the Big Ten at that time. And, the Big Ten conference is tough. It's just a tough, and you've got to be good every weekend. And, sometimes you're as good as the team that you're playing, but you lost two players due to injury and don't have anybody to replace them this week, so you're not as good a football team. It still takes good football players to win. Yes, they have to be coached to the standard of the rest of the schools coached in the Big Ten, but some schools like Ohio State, and Michigan, they're going to have more players game in and game out than most of their opponents within the Big Ten, and that's just how it's going to be. So you can't be just as good a football coach. You got to find a way to be better, and that's difficult.
Few minutes here, Dick Vermeil with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, Hall of Fame coach with the Rams, Eagles, and Chiefs, NFL inductee. Got that gold jacket over the summer and a Super Bowl champ. Coach Vermeil, tell me what your philosophy was when it came to finding assistants and hiring. Matt Rule did a great job of hiring at Baylor. He's finishing out his staff now at Nebraska, and it's a lot of the same folks that helped him win at Temple. There's also a Baylor connection and maybe some Carolina connection. But you've had to do it. You've had to bring people in to work with you and work for you. What are some key traits you need with guys on that football staff?
Well, in college football, I think it's slightly different than it is in pro football. You need some real fine technical football coaches on every staff. But on the college staff, you also need some real great recruiters. And some guys are just better at it than others. And I remember Pepper Rogers telling me a long time ago, and I thought he was a good coach and a real character, real football personality. And he said to me, I only need a few real coaches. What I need is a lot of recruiters. And, And Nebraska is just a great football state. But you can't lose a great player in Nebraska to Ohio State or to Michigan or to Iowa or to Wisconsin and still be a successful program. Because you can't get everybody out of Southern California or other states that have great play players to come to Nebraska anymore. Everybody's done such an intense job in recruiting these kids and showing off the facilities. No, I haven't been to Nebraska in a long time, but I know they have good facilities. Yeah, I was at Clemson 2 weeks ago to watch them play and see their football program and their facilities. It's second to nobody's. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable facilities and a major factor in recruiting positively. So, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Nebraska. It's going to be tough because they've got to beat, Ohio State, Michigan, who are consistently going to be deeper and maybe have a few more what you call really blue chip players. And but if there's anybody who can do it, like I thought Scott could do it, I really did. And I still believe he's a fine football coach. But Matt Rule has a little more exposure now. He's been in the NFL. I guarantee you he learned a lot about coaching football in the NFL, okay? Because there's no such thing as a bad team. Or no such light schedule or anything like that. Everybody's good. Everybody has good players. Similar to, in a way, the Big Ten is. But I think Matt could add a degree of scheme, things he learned in the NFL from the other great coaches. All coaches steal from the other guy. It's a copycat game, And I think he'll add that. There's no substitute for his wisdom and experience. And, he'll do some things better than he did them in Carolina because he recognized it didn't work in Carolina. Then he'll find a better way to do it. And he'll go back to some of the things he's done in Baylor that were extremely successful that will help him there that maybe not as effective in Carolina. So I'm anxious. I'm interested, very interested in seeing how it goes. But it'll take some time. It'll take some time.
Coach Dick Vermeil's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio talking Nebraska's hire of Matt Rule. And, Coach, you talked about learning lessons from the NFL, and I'm going to turn this back to your career just briefly. As whenever Matt Rule took the stage on Monday and with his introductory press conference, he really captured the room. Seems like he's a very gifted communicator, and part of that seems like it stems from his father, who was a minister, and he really seems like a minister when he's up there. But he captured the room, and I want to ask you, you're a guy who took a hiatus from your coaching career in order to get into broadcasting and learn the ropes of communication a little bit. So I want to get your take on just the importance of effective communication as a head coach. How can it help you? Or I guess on the flip side, how can it hurt you? What did you learn from your broadcasting career and taking it back into coaching?
Well, the number one thing I learned, because I was on everybody else's practice field, including Nebraska's and Bill Snyder's at Kansas State, Tom Coughlin at Boston College, the great coaches, all around the Big Ten, all around the United States. I learned from watching them practice, and nobody ran a better football practice than they did at Nebraska in those days, But you learn, and you talk to coaches, you talk to people, and you say to yourself, I think these things I was doing when I was coaching are better than this, but there's a lot of things they're doing here that was better than the way I was doing it. So the more experience you have, the more opportunities you have to grow. As long as ego doesn't get involved, you always got to say it's my way or the highway, and I'm the only one who knows how to do it. Take that attitude, you're going to get beat. I learned so much from coaches that were great coaches just by watching them in the NFL as well. So I think Matt will bring some of that NFL experience to him because he coached against some great coaches, and I'm sure he learned a lot of to-dos and a lot of not-to-dos. You always do.
Dick Vermeil's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, Hall of Fame coach. Coach, going to switch it to one of our favorites. We love having him on and getting a chance to see him, Grant Wistrom. You drafted Grant. You guys went to Super Bowls. You won a Super Bowl. You're one of his favorites, absolutely. He was smiling when we talked to him with your Hall of Fame induction. And tell us a little bit about your relationship with Grant.
Well, I had the opportunity to broadcast a number of Nebraska games all through his career. with Brent Musburger. And I just admired how he played the game. And I recognized when I had an opportunity later in my coming back into pro football, I like building a football team with deep character. Now, it has to be backed by talent. But there was no question in my mind in my second year there in the draft that I was going to draft Grant Wistrom if somebody didn't before me, because I wanted him to be an integral part of rebuilding, because he's a guy that can infect your other players with just by his example, let alone his ability to play. He was a little bit undersized, but it didn't matter to me. And I passed up a couple of guys that are going in the NFL Hall of Fame to draft him because I believe so much in him. And I say to myself today, I made a hell of a good decision. I wouldn't trade him for anybody because his contribution would go deeper than just how he played the game. It's how he practiced, how he came to meeting rooms, his own temperament. And how bright he was as well. So I know I love the guy. He's one of my all-time favorite guys.
Dick Vermeil, Hall of Famer, with his thoughts on his relationship with Matt Rule and his time with Grant Wistrom. Coach, it was awesome to spend time with you. Thanks for giving us a few minutes today.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Back with you, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio Weekend Edition. As we're presented by Currency, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Brandon Vogel, and we're streaming this morning as well on a couple of different platforms. ESPN Lincoln Facebook, ESPN Lincoln Twitter, and you're invited to follow along as well on the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter at HVarsity Radio. You can catch the show in all its streaming glory Monday through Saturday there, but also Coffee and Cream with Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers. It's been a great week for those guys. Awesome to have them part of the family. A staple on Saturdays and throughout the week is Brandon Vogel, managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine. Get the holiday hookup for sure. Can do so by logging on HailVarsity.com/subscribe. Enter the promo code GBR and save $10 on that subscription. In honor of Caleb Williams, I do believe Brandon Vogel has GBR painted on his nails this morning. Either that or some sort of negative message towards the Netherlands today with World Cup action. Vogues, good morning. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. I'm not that fluent in Dutch, so I looked up some things that would fit on eight spaces and decided I don't know if I can trust this Google translation. So I just went with Go USA.
Well, Dutch is an interesting language. That's good. I loved Go USA, but Dutch is one of those interesting languages. I went to South Africa. This was after my senior year of high school, and they speak this weird mix of, it's like the native tongue mixed with Dutch mixed with English, and like you hear people speaking Dutch and you think you're having a stroke. Like it sounds similar to English enough that you're like, what is this person saying? And then you realize you can't understand a thing that they're saying like at all. And it's just one of those languages that it was throwing me for a loop whenever I was in South Africa. Because I thought I could understand what this person was saying, and then you realize, no, this is a completely foreign language that just kind of sounds like English.
Yeah, it's one that's even like, you kind of accumulate enough like working knowledge of Spanish, French, maybe German to like look at something and be like, maybe I can take a crack at pronouncing that. But Dutch, not so much, at least for me.
Brandon Vogel is with us. And Vogues, let's keep with the translation theme. How would you translate week 1 in the Matt Rule era?
pretty well. It got thrown for a loop in the middle of the week, that's for sure. And I think that who knows where some of these coaching discussions would have been if things had gone a little bit more normally. But I thought they kept a pretty smart and contained recruiting strategy. Like, you don't have a choice when that period opens back up, and they largely stuck local. So they were able to get the coaches that they were good with in, and that helped. And I think putting a focus first on not even the 500-mile radius at this point, kind of the 50-mile radius around Lincoln, was probably the way to go.
Brandon Vogel's with us here, a Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Vogues, we had a Twitter poll up yesterday, and I posed the same question to you, and that's, how important is it to you over these next couple weeks that Matt Rule secures a recommitment from Malachi Coleman? Because there's two places I can go with this. First is on the field, where, you know what, Malachi seems to fit that mold of what Matt Rule is looking for to a T, where they have traits that makes them supremely gifted athletes. They're trying to mold him into a football player, and with Malachi's frame and track speed, he seems to fit that mold well. But then also you have the factor of that 500-mile radius and keeping the local kids home. But then you also go the other side of what I talked about yesterday, opportunity cost. With the amount of time that's going to be spent recruiting Malachi, you could be spending recruiting other guys, or going to the transfer portal. So how important is it to you that Matt Rule secures that recommitment?
I think it would be a nice jolt right at the start if you were able to do that. That said, we've seen with Malachi Coleman's timeline, and he's been fairly open about this the entire process. Like, he was really tied to Mickey Joseph, and that's a credit to the job Mickey Joseph did recruiting him. And if that's just going to be the deal breaker, that might be reality. So I think you're right. The opportunity cost of this comes into play here, not just with him, but really anybody who's in the class and maybe wavering at this point. Like, you make your pitch, you follow up on it, and if by early signing, it looks like you're still in for a kind of a dogfight for a player or two, you got to start considering your options. So I don't think it's as damaging, as it would be to lose a player in state of that stature. I mean, we've seen that play out, a handful of times at Nebraska, where you don't have a lot of players of that caliber come around every year, though it seems to be more and more as Nebraska high school football, I think, improves. And landing those guys becomes vitally important. I think you get a little bit of a pass in the first recruiting cycle. I mean, personally, whether it's staff, the existing roster, or commits even, I kind of view it as you've got nothing. Like, there's no guarantees. Assume nobody is coming back. And that way, when some people do, it feels like a little bit of a positive surprise.
Brandon Vogel is with us, and there is transition, and there'll be attrition with transition. Could be recruiting class because of how many of the kids that have decommitted, to your point, were so close with Mickey Joseph. And then even within Nebraska's own roster, with the portal opening up, you can gain in the portal. Nebraska did that at a high level with some key offensive spots last winter. Casey Thompson, Grant, of course, Palmer. But now you have kind of a guy that folks were excited to see and still may get to. It's not done. But, Bogues, I want your reaction to the Ernest Hausman announcement this week, because, I mean, that was something that I guess isn't that shocking with really the staff transition, how close you would assume Ernest is with Coach Rude and shifts happening on the staff. But, man, the way that kid performed and the way, quite honestly, a thin linebacker room performed, I mean, Rudy needs to be commended for the job. And, man, those backers were playing great ball to end the season.
Yeah, they were. And, super impressive year from Hausman, coming from Columbus. It's a big jump for anybody to get inserted to the little linebacker spot in the Big Ten as a true freshman. And I think even more so the case with him. And, it did come as a surprise even understanding, even though I just said like my base setting is assume nobody is coming back. That one did surprise me. Ernest seemed like somebody who was really bought in to Nebraska and what they were about and getting better and continuing to help them build in the future. And maybe that's, still how this plays out, but it did come as a bit of a surprise for me. And he's going to be a really, really good player. I think everybody saw that. He's got kind of unique measurables for a linebacker, and I expect demand to be pretty high for him based on the season he had.
Brandon, two-part question here to follow up on that. First, that Ernest Hausman into the portal, does that confirm to you that Coach Root is not going to be back next season? And then to follow up on that, we spent Thursday talking a little about Phil Snow. Does that also open up the possibility of a guy like Glenn Sherman down at Georgia?
Yeah, it could. We talked on Thursday about Snow, and at that point I was kind of like, well, he hasn't joined the staff yet, which gives you a little bit of pause. And the longer that goes, I think the longer amount of pause you need to take with that. So we'll see if Nebraska ends up going a different direction at defensive coordinator. It's starting to feel a little bit more likely that's the case there. And, until you get that person in for any of these, recruits or even current defensive players, it becomes a little bit hard to know exactly what you're looking at. And, the fact that Hausman was one of the first, I think, 3 names we heard of at Nebraska in the portal, did seem an indication to me that his position coach probably wasn't coming back.
Vogues, let's spend a minute here on how things are going with Matt Rule. And it's been a week with, a week ago today, he's on game day making his announcement. You have the Monday presser. You have the Mickey news on Wednesday. You have the in-state visits where everybody and anybody on staff is all over the metro regions, and he started off Tuesday making phone calls to all the high school coaches. So that Baylor plan of introduction has been followed up with, you would assume, here in Lincoln. But his vision is to coach you hard, to develop you, to get that speed and explosiveness as a reality, and then share that with you. He'll communicate, but I really like the fact that he's, listened to the team. He's brought everyone together from the team. And what do you like about the program? What don't you like? How do we go the direction you want, getting input? But ultimately, whether you're in the locker room or you're in the living room, he's going to share his vision with you and ask you if it's for you. Do you think his vision, as we understand it, as we've heard talking points from him, do you think that's going to connect and resonate with some of the kids? And I know that's a case-by-case basis, but overall, what he's saying, do you think it sounds good to a high school senior to be or a junior to be in college football or in the high school ranks?
Yeah, the timeline has been so compressed, and it's not like, Rule didn't have time to consider, like, well, if I took this job, what are those pitches going to be? He definitely did. But, the pitch probably isn't as strong as it might be 2-3 weeks from now, or even 4 weeks from now. It gets interesting, I think, because we saw at Baylor, and, it's been kind of well covered at this point, the state that class was in when he took over there. Well, now you're going to try and get as much done as you can for early signing, of course, but with how this staff has recruited and the type of players they looked at, they really made some hay with players who were a little bit overlooked. And so it'll be interesting to see. You'll have this late signing period too, to see what's available in that. But the really big thing, it becomes the transfer portal, I think, and maybe not. We'll see when it officially opens next week to see how they attack that. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to juggle getting your recruiting infrastructure up and running the way you want it to, while also assessing the portal. So that kind of becomes the next big question for me. And, in terms of immediate impact on 2023, that might be the bigger one. How does that pitch land with potential transfers, guys who might be a little further along in their career and more likely to contribute right away?
Yeah, Vogue's next 3 weeks are going to be pretty crucial in terms of what this team looks like in 2023. But to zoom out, how important is this next 3 weeks in terms of the grand foundation building for what Matt Rule's trying to do at Nebraska? Is this something where, you can clean up some mistakes later, or is this a pretty important 3 weeks in your opinion?
It's pretty important. I would say, I don't know if you need to have the entire foundation down in the next 3 weeks, but you'd like to be happy with your progress. So get a sense for who's definitely in the class, who's looking elsewhere and probably isn't going to stay. See what you're able to find in the transfer portal. And, they've already made a couple of offers for FCS transfers. That'll be an interesting component of this. And there's just going to be a lot of change between now and basically Christmas. I mean, the early signing period, I think, ends on the 23rd this year. And at that point, I think if things go well, you'll hope you can be able to step back and be like, okay, this looks like the core of our team. You'll have a better sense exactly of what immediate needs you have. And then you'll still have some time to address that via the late signing period. And then, of course, the portal continues.
Vogue's going to switch up, get your take on Nebraska volleyball moving forward. Hard fought last night, 3-1 over Kansas. And let's talk momentum and the shape Cook and company are in moving forward in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, kind of gutted one out there against Kansas. Credit to the Jayhawks for making things tough. And, I think through the Delaware State match and then Kansas last night, you could see Nebraska's still kind of working through some things post the loss of Kenzie Knuckles. Getting Nicklin Hames back was important. I thought her connection with Caitlin Horde last night really kind of showed up, and you saw the value of having a Hames available. So it's going to be, a little bit, I think, of a white knuckle ride for Nebraska throughout this tournament, as long as it lasts. I mean, right now, they're looking at playing the winner of Oregon, Arkansas. Oregon's the 3 seed in that bracket, so you could be getting as good a possible team as you've seen. And I mean, even if Arkansas comes through, the SEC is having a pretty strong year. That was the case prior to the tournament, and then got some key wins in the tournament already. So it's gonna be tough, but you're through to the next week and you get the chance to keep getting a little bit better. I think that's the big thing, with the injuries Nebraska has dealt with. Cook really structures these seasons to be playing your best volleyball at this very moment. I don't know if we can say that about Nebraska, but they get the chance to continue to try and build towards that going into next week. And they'll have an extra day rest on whoever they play.
Vokes, who's the most important player on that team moving forward throughout the NCAA tournament if the Huskers want to keep their hopes alive? It's a tough road. You look ahead, and you don't want to look too far ahead, but you look ahead to Louisville looming on the horizon. And with just all that in mind, who do you think the most important player on this volleyball team right now is?
Might be, it might be a familiar face, somebody who's played a lot of volleyball for Nebraska, but I immediately look towards Maddie Kubik. She's a 6 rotation player. Whoever is in that back row, their ability to pass. I mean, that's the big thing you lose without Kenzie Knuckles. She was such a defensive stalwart. And Maddie's been playing 6 rotations since she showed up, which is super impressive. But then, when you look at Nebraska, when it gets into these matches against a team like an Oregon or a team like Louisville, there's so much talent both ways that it kind of comes down to, do you have that singular performer who's just able to get kills when it's hard? And I think Nebraska has, against the very, very top of the sport, which it is part of, occasionally over the past couple of years, it's lacked that a little bit. So you look at what Maddie does defensively in the back row and also her role up front there as kind of your go-to person. If she has a great remainder of the tournament, I think that gives Nebraska its best chance to continue advancing.
Vogue's College Football Championship weekend some time. I don't know when, but it will be fun to see Nebraska back on this stage on a Saturday, and people of a certain age, either Elijah is a little grade school or junior high kid, can remember that 10 years ago. We're wondering how things are going to go against Wisconsin as Nebraska's trying to get to a BCS bowl game or a New Year's Day 6. You had a run there, 3 of 4 to get to the conference title game, and you were just right there against Oklahoma and in Texas before you moved neighborhoods. And now you got everybody else, it feels like, in the West that's made a trip, right? And the West is not long for this world, but it's Minnesota and Illinois and Nebraska that haven't gotten to the party. Here comes Purdue. Any shot with Purdue and Michigan making this interesting tonight?
I think so. I mean, Michigan without Blake Corum still beat Ohio State, so you can feel pretty good about that. But just how Michigan tends to play, like, you can find yourself in a close game, and we've seen some impressive defensive performances from Purdue. Still thinking back to what they did against Minnesota and Minneapolis was a big one, and obviously they can move the ball and score on a lot of teams. So I do think Purdue has a chance, but we'll kind of see what happens. Michigan's a favorite for a reason.
Vogues, your reaction to USC getting their first taste of Big Ten football last night against the Utes? The Utes just gave them everything they could handle along the lines of scrimmage.
I hadn't thought of that yet, but that's a pretty good way to put it.
That's good.
USC had no disrespect to what they've been able to do, but they've walked a fine line kind of all season long, and where they were at going into that game was probably the ideal version of that season. That said, Utah has certainly in the past couple of years been the team that brings reality, and boy did they. When you think about falling down 17-3, tying that up before halftime, and then winning by 23 points. Like, Utah's just kind of amazing. And I know people thought they were going to be amazing coming in, and you lose that first game to Florida and then drop 2 more along the way. It kind of becomes like, oh, this is a season lost. Well, they kind of took it back by doing what a lot of people expected them to do and win the Pac-12 and breathe life into Ohio State's bid for the playoff. I guess we'll see what else happens.
That's where I was going to go, Brandon. Is Ohio State in, or is it still wait and see for them, depending on what happens today?
I mean, I would think they are probably in. We'll see what happens with TCU, K-State. If TCU were to, speaking of teams, kind of walking a fine line, there's another one. Been in a lot of close games. If they were to drop a close one to K-State, I could see the Horned Frogs still getting in. It becomes tough. I don't think that's the case for USC. It's just you're not undefeated, and I think that's the difference between the Trojans and the Horned Frogs when you get right down to it.
I'm calling my shot now. If Bama gets into the college football playoff, they're winning it all. I'm calling it right now on Saturday, December 3rd, 2022. If Alabama gets into the college football playoff, they're going to win it all. Just saying it.
If Bama gets in, and I know you could still have chaos, and K-State should they were all over TCU the first time they danced in Manhattan, so that's not going to be a total shock. But TCU's had the flair for the dramatic this year, but there's no way a 2-loss team should jump the way the season has finished for Tennessee, right? That's one of Bama's losses. I mean, they're also a couple plays away from being 8-4 and Saban hiding out of the lake house this year. I mean, they're good, but they're not vintage. And listen, I know Ohio State's got really one win. They have their flaws, but they're in. They're in with the USC loss. At least they should be. There's no way. I mean, you're gonna have Kevin Warren make a beeline down to Atlanta for a steel cage challenge with the SEC commissioner if that happens. It'd be kind of funny, but not really. I mean, think about Ohio State. I mean, they already ripped a spot from TCU back in 2014. They jumped them because they dropped a nuke on Wisconsin, I think. So the way it looks right now is you're going to have two Big Ten teams in the college football playoff, and that's nice extra, a holiday bonus, so to speak, here for the conference. So we'll see where it goes. What do you think here? I mean, Vogues, with who's, I guess, most in danger if they're upset? I mean, USC, yeah, they're out, but with the remaining matchups, if Michigan gets beat, do you think they're safe? I think they are.
Yeah, I think so, because if Michigan loses, then you're, assume TCU
go to 4,
win.
Probably.
Yeah, and you can't include Ohio State and not have Michigan, I don't think, because of the head-to-head result just a week ago. So I think really TCU is kind of the only wild card in my mind. Even if Georgia lost, I think Georgia is safe. And that perhaps that's obvious as an undefeated number one team. Becomes interesting with LSU then, though. If Georgia were to go down, it becomes
They have 3 losses though, don't they?
I know. Do you keep the SEC champion out? It gets pretty crazy.
Vogue, before we get you out of here, USA Netherlands coming up 9 a.m. here Central Time. Are you showing the little guy the beautiful game, showing him the complexities of the World Cup in soccer?
That's the plan. I'll sit him down and tell him that the Dutch invented total football. It was revolutionary, beautiful style. They don't play that anymore. They're actually really, really boring right now, and the U.S. is going to have to make the most of the 3 chances it might get. But hey, it's the knockout stages. Whatever it takes.
Vogues has got his American flag bandana ready to go, and he'll throw it on and watch a little World Cup. Elijah will be popping a tall boy here in about 29 minutes. And
vodka Red Bull, baby.
Oh,
I gotta stay awake.
It's Blackout Saturday. Vogues, you have a good weekend and enjoy your soccer and football today, bud.
You too, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. There he is, Brandon Vogel, with us from Hail Varsity, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Reminder for Nebraska fans, your chance to subscribe to Hail Varsity this holiday season. HailVarsity.com/subscribe. And there is a part where you can key in a code. That code is GBR, and you save $10. You save $10 on your subscription. That's the print. That's the digital. That's all the great Husker coverage you want with Brandon Vogel, Aaron Sorensen, Brady Oltmans, of course, Jacob Padilla. It's just Mike Babcock is the best there is. So think about that for yourself. It's okay to get yourself a gift, or that Husker fan. Quick time out. The Iron Horse joins us. Gary Sharp on the way. It's Hail Varsity Weekend, presented by Currency.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out. Excellent strategy, sir.
Back with you. It's Weekend Edition. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. No passing out today, Elijah Herbel, as you watch the U.S. and the Netherlands.
We'll see how the result goes.
We will put an over-under on if Elijah needs to make a phone call or it's Uber, phone call to get picked up by some of his radio brethren. We welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us. Sharpie, how are you, man?
Good. I'm ready for Captain America. He's in the starting lineup. Let's go, USA. Let's go, Elijah.
Where's Gio Reyna? That's the big question. I don't want to see him in the 85th minute again.
That's a great question. People are tuning in to hear football talk. We're talking about football. I've wondered that as well. I wondered why he did not get inserted as a sub against Wales.
I am convinced Dortmund has paid Berhalter some money under the table to keep him off the field and keep him healthy during the World Cup. He's got a habit of picking up injuries when he's playing for the USA.
I vehemently disagree because I don't think soccer has anything under the table.
Oh, that's a bold take. I encourage anyone to go watch the Netflix documentary on FIFA.
Well, I'm going to make this about American football. Switching back to my comfort zone. Sharpie, you're locked in. You're close with the high school scene and all the prep talent around Lincoln and Omaha. Your thought here on Matt Rule and him and his staff yesterday storming the different programs around Lincoln and Omaha.
Well, I tweeted it out. I talked to coaches that were in Lincoln that met with Matt Rule, and then I talked to coaches that were in Omaha that got to meet his assistants. To a man, all of them said that, first of all, it was refreshing to hear people that are not from here to show how excited they are about Nebraska football, that they wanted to be there. One of the Rule's assistants told a coach in Omaha, he said, we were really hoping that Matt would take the Nebraska job. So it's kind of leading me to believe that the guys that are already on the staff, that was kind of predetermined, that Rule said, hey, I'm going to get a job, and when I get that job, you got to go. We got to go quickly. Are you in? And they all said yes. Ed Foley, it goes over really well, a very happy guy, a staff that likes to talk football. And I think another thing that is important is, and this was something that was said to me after they met with Matt Rule, is you've got pros, guys you can tell that have recently been around professional football and dealt with older players, because there's not a lot of Mickey Mouse stuff. There's not a lot of wasted words in conversation. They kind of get right to it. So I think the initial impression was pretty good. They reached out throughout the entire state, and they said, hey, you know what, we're gonna check in on the 23s. We're going to get to the 24s and the 25s. And then they reached out to other schools like Lincoln High, who they may flip a wide receiver, but they reached out to schools that don't necessarily have prospects that are headed to Nebraska, but they said, hey, we just want you to know we're here. We're going to be getting in touch with you, but we're going to focus on finishing up 23. So I think the first day impression was really, really good. I will tell you something that will resonate big time is that Matt Rule's first stop was Lincoln High. That's the closest high school to the university, and it's not a high school that's produced a ton of football talent, but it's a good school. I mean, it's a legendary school. And for Matt Rule to stop there first, I think says a lot. And I think yesterday was a good day, and of course, people will decide if it was a really good day if they were able to keep Malachi Coleman in the fold.
Now, Sharpie, what's your take on the fact that Lincoln High has said, though, this is the first football coach we've seen from Nebraska walk through our doors since 2011? It's 11 years, and you can talk about the fact that Lincoln High hasn't had a lot of D1 talent through the past 11 years, but they have had a few. They've had guys like Cedric Case. I mean, he's been a phenomenal quarterback at the high school level, and you'd think Nebraska would at least go do their due diligence. So what's your reaction to the fact, first time in 11 years a head football coach at Nebraska has walked through the doors of Lincoln High? Yeah, I'm not surprised. When Avante Dickerson was playing at Westside, that was kind of the thing that was said as well. Man, it's been a long time since we've seen a Nebraska coach here. So I'm not really surprised. Nebraska coaches can't make it everywhere in person. I really think, in the last year, Nebraska made a concerted effort from Scott Frostoff to Mickey Joseph of getting into the high schools, like physically. Because the schools will come to you. They'll come to Lincoln. They'll come to your team camps. They'll come to your games. But I think they've done a better job of getting a body in the hallway, and I think that's important. And, I think as we kind of figure out Matt Rule and you hear the Texas high school coaches talk about their relationship, you're going to see these coaches locally a lot. They're going to be at games. They're going to be in hallways. And the head coach, I think, is really, really comfortable in going to strange places to sit down and talk football. So I think yesterday was a good day. It was a good start. I think that's the way you want to start when you're essentially everybody is brand new. You don't know them, they don't know us, and they reached out. And you know what? I think I've also seen this. This is from Matt Rule the other day in his press conference. Instead of waiting for the fans to embrace you, which some coaches will do when they go to foreign places where they don't have a connection to, Matt Rule is reaching out to us, and I think that's an important step for him to start to lay the groundwork before we can ever start judging him on the kind of football that they play on the field.
Gary Sharp is with us, weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio. And Sharpie, let's go back to the living room visits. And you're right on with Lincoln High, kind of being the first stop with Matt Rule, but then an in-home with Malachi Coleman. You know, if not Lincoln, then where? What's your take on where Malachi could end up if he doesn't kind of recommit to Nebraska?
Well, I think here, let me first say this about Malachi. And I've been kind of hard on him because I think I want more out of him. I think there is more out of him. I was very disappointed that he publicly decommitted before he met with Matt Rule, knowing that he was going to meet with Matt Rule. Come on, man. Don't do that. I know what you're looking for. You're looking for attention. But you know what? Nebraska has a plan, and this staff has players that look like you that are long, lean, and have great speed that they've developed. So you're a perfect fit. But I do understand Malachi was close to Mickey Joseph. I mean, there was no doubt. He committed to Mickey Joseph before he committed to Nebraska. And a guy that is a mentor in his life was in jail the other day. And so he just needs to be settled. And I think that was probably the tone of the conversation. Matt Rule, saying, hey, this is what we can do for you. This is what you can do for us. This is we want to do this is, hey, things are going to be okay here. Mickey Joseph may not be on our staff, but things are going to be fine. And I think that's something that Malachi needs and wants to hear. But if it's not Nebraska, and I do believe that he will recommit to Nebraska. Oklahoma State and Miami stopped by yesterday. We're going to find out. He's now a free agent, technically. Those non-committable offers that were out there that people canceled his visit because they were like, he's going to Nebraska, don't waste our time. Well, we'll see if those are true or not. But I do believe that he'll stay at Nebraska at the end of the day, but it won't be, super quick.
Gary Sharp's with us here on a Saturday morning edition. Schmidt, go for it.
I was just going to go from the recruitable player to recruiting the locker room, Sharpie, and reaction about Ernest Hausman.
Well, if you look at the players that are in the portal, outside of Gold yesterday, and let's go to Ernest Hausman, they are players that don't have a position coach. Now, Ernest Hausman will fall under that category because I have Wandale Robinson and a little bit of Casey Rogers. But when they left Nebraska, I went, oh, no. The other guys, you're like, okay, it's not working out here. You probably should have never been here. Go to a place where you're going to get to play. But when we see Ernest Hausman go through the roller coaster of a raw freshman and really start to take off in the last month, we're thinking big things. But there's a couple of things that came to mind right away, guys. Who's talking to him? Where is he getting this from? I know he's confused. He's a young kid. He had a great relationship with Barrett Ruud. And now Barrett Ruud's not going to be there. And there's all this kind of unknown. So I caution everybody that it's going to be chaotic over the next 45 days or so when the portal opens on December 5th. And then once it opens again after spring football, you just got to be really, really patient because you can put your name in and then you can come back out. And I think in this case, when Nebraska gets their position coach, their number one person to recruit is Ernest Hausman. I don't think he's gone from Nebraska because I think he just wants some stability and to know what the future is. But you know what? I want the best for players, and they have this opportunity to go see what they're worth, and I want them to be happy wherever they're going to be. But I think we have to, with Ernest, just wait until Nebraska gets their position coach, and then maybe they move forward on him. But that really caught all of us off guard. I can tell you to a man of people that I know that are inside of that program, that are still inside of that program, they were shocked that Ernest Hausman put his name into the portal. But they, just like me, said, hey, preach a little patience. Let's see how this plays out.
Sharp, let's get to position coaches and vacancies. But first, I do want to bring up a comment that we have in here from Brennan on our stream chat, and that's about Ed Foley. He's wondering whether Ed Foley is related to noted motivational speaker Matt Foley of Van down by the river fame.
Hey, so people saw he tweeted out the picture. He went to Runza, so he's won a lot of fans. One coach I talked to yesterday said he's just a happy football guy. He said he's kind of he walks in, he's got a big smile on his face. He looks like a football coach. He just sat there in front of him and he said, they just talk football. And he said, he's just one big happy guy. So I don't know about the motivational stuff, but he's a guy that I think people, you first look and you go, is that Mike Cavanaugh's brother? But then I think as people are going to get to know him, you're going to see, and I think with a lot of the staff guys, because I think Nebraska hired a football dork. And I don't say dork as a mean term. Matt Rule is a football dork. He loves football. He likes talking football. I think we're going to find that out with the staff. They just like the game of football. Not a lot of Mickey Mouse stuff. I think they just want to talk football. They want to coach football. They want to be around football. And Ed Foley is just a happy football guy.
Ed's much safer in the living room than
imagine that recruiting
Matt Foley. That's all I'm saying.
You go anywhere but Nebraska, you'll be eating government cheese in a van down by the river.
Brian Bushini, what do you want to do with your life?
Lottie freaking da. Yeah, pretty good. This just turned on us. I'm sorry.
Well, Gary, let's get back to the point then, and let's talk D.C., that vacancy. It sounds like where we're moving in the recent days is away from Phil Snow. Doesn't sound like that's happening, and he doesn't really fit the mold of what Matt Rule claims he wants anyway, in a young and hungry, maybe a little inexperienced staff. So what's your lean with where Nebraska's going defensive coordinator? Is this something you think that we're going to know soon, or is this something that might take a little bit?
Well, I think I'm starting to believe, guys. Phil Snow, by the way, I'm hearing nothing. Jeff Collins, a little bit, former Georgia Tech coach. Glenn Schumann, who is on Georgia's staff, no real connection to Rule, except for Rule has a former defensive back coach that is the DB coach at Georgia. His name is coming up. But I'm wondering if the next round of assistants to fill out the staff are either coaching this weekend or they're still with the Carolina Panthers and they want to wait until they're officially eliminated from the playoff race before they move. So I think that we're getting closer to filling out the staff. But you look at the staff positions that are left, boy, aren't those some of the most important ones on this team for this roster, what it looks like right now in 23. I mean, we're talking offensive line, we're talking defensive line, we're talking defensive coordinator, and in particular we're talking wide receiver where, you may need to do a lot of portaling with the wide receiver position when it's all said and done.
Sharpie, is Schumann a possibility? I know he's a name, and I look at his situation at Georgia, $800,000 a year, co-coordinator down there with Muschamp. Do you think he's gettable? I guess is my question.
I think if he wants to be a defensive coordinator, he would up his salary, of course. Sure. I think there's that possibility. I think if you look at Matt Rule's staff, they also have been. A lot of them have coached different positions. They've been director of ops. They've been recruiting coordinators. So they have a very diverse background. But I think if he's a guy that they want to pursue, I think they would have a chance. When would you get him? That would be the thing, because Georgia looks like they could play until the middle of January. But there's a lot of different names out there. It's really gone kind of quiet after the dabble with Elijah Robinson at Texas A&M, who appears that he's going to stay and get a little bump and maybe a different title under Jimbo Fisher.
Sharpie, last thought here before we get you out, and we're up against the clock here, so about 30 seconds. USA versus Netherlands, are you watching? Do you have a prediction? What are you thinking? Does the U.S. finally make it past the round of 16 after so many World Cups of getting stuck in this round?
Well, it would be nice, because wouldn't that be something? What would this country be like if the U.S. was really, really good at soccer? I don't like the Dutch today. I'm not going to eat the Dutch potato chips, anything like that. I think we go to penalties, but I don't think we advance today.
That's bold.
Gary Sharp with us, weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Sharpie, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for the update and the insight as always, bud.
Hey, thanks, boys.
All right, there he is, Gary Sharp with us. Hail Varsity, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. And a reminder, this holiday season and just in general, be sure to get buckled up. And it's real easy. Using your seatbelt saves lives, prevents injuries, only if properly worn. Buckle up, a message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office.
Schmitty, before we get out of here, I'm calling my shot. USA 1-0 over the Dutch with a 63rd minute goal from Christian Pulisic.
That is oddly and beautifully specific from one Elijah Herbel. I think my upset is going to be LSU today.
Wow. I love it.
We're gonna burn the tape.
We're both gonna be
way
wrong.
way off. Plenty of college football on the way with ESPN Lincoln. We'll be back at you Monday at 4 with Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.